Hey everyone, Mike here. Welcome back to Brain Blossoms. Last time we broke down the 464 breathing technique and how it basically tells your brain, relax, there's no bear chasing you. This week, psychedelics, but not the lava lamp, tie-dye, hippie soundtrack kind. We're talking science, therapy, and the real research behind substances like psilocybin, MDMA, and ketamine. Oh, and yes, we'll sprinkle in a little humor because science doesn't have to sound like a robot reading a prescription label. Quick refresher. Brain Blossoms is the bite-sized spin-off of Planning Thoughts. Short episodes that take complex psychology and neuroscience, strip away the buzzwords, and serve it with a side of sarcasm because the brain is brilliant and also the reason you forget your keys in the fridge. So psychedelics, substances that have gone from taboo to the treatment room. All right, let's talk about MDMA, or as it's better known in the wild, ecstasy, Molly, or that thing your friend at a rave swears is totally pure. Spoiler alert, it usually isn't. MDMA is one of those drugs that blurs the line between stimulant and psychedelic. It's like caffeine and a warm hug had a weirdly empathetic baby. So what actually happens when someone takes it? MDMA floods your brain with serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, which are your brain's feel-good, reward, and energy chemicals respectively. Result? A huge wave of euphoria, connection, and that feeling like you finally understand everyone's soul. People report heightened empathy, deeper connections, deeper conversations. The music suddenly feels like the soundtrack of life itself. In a 2021 Nature Medicine Phase 3 trial led by Jennifer Mitchell and colleagues, MDMA-assisted therapy showed significant reductions in PTSD symptoms, with 2/3 of participants no longer meeting the diagnostic criteria after treatment. That's not a small effect. That's huge. And it happened with careful dosing and guided therapy, not a playlist. All right, let's move on from rave to the rainforest. Today's guest, psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. You know, those little fungi that have been blowing minds since long before Coachella was a thing. Now, psilocybin works by converting in the body to psilocin, which binds to your serotonin 2A receptors, basically hijacking your brain's communication system and telling it, hey, let's get creative. What happens next is a symphony of altered perceptions. Colors breathe, sounds shimmer, time melts, and you suddenly understand why your fern feels like your best friend. But here's where it gets fascinating. Science has started catching up with what ancient cultures already knew, that psilocybin can profoundly shift consciousness and maybe even heal. A 2020 JAMA Psychiatry study led by Alan Davis and Roland Griffiths found that 2 guided psilocybin sessions combined with psychotherapy led to rapid and lasting antidepressant effect. Even 4 weeks later, about 70% of participants showed a significant reduction in depressive symptoms. And of course, ketamine, originally an anesthetic, now an FDA-approved option in its esketamine nasal spray form. Research summarized in the American Journal of Psychiatry in 2022 shows rapid antidepressant effects within hours for treatment-resistant depression. It's not a classic psychedelic, but it's part of the same growing wave of what researchers call rapid-acting neuroplastic treatment. Now, funny enough, if emotions had a reset button, this would be it. Except instead of pressing it, you need a trained medical team, a therapist, and a legal waiver. Here's the neuroscience side. Psychedelics like psilocybin reduce the brain's default mode network activity. That's the system that keeps our sense of self and repetitive thought loops running. Now, basically, the inner narrator takes a coffee break, which allows for new patterns of thought and emotion to emerge. And then we have functional MRI studies. They show that under psilocybin, the brain's communication patterns become globally connected and flexible. Other research and Cell reports in 2018 found increased neuroplasticity, meaning neurons form new connections faster. So while you're not seeing sounds in the clinical session, your brain is rewiring during that therapeutic change. Now let's hit a few highlights. MDMA plus therapy for PTSD. In that Nature Medicine 2021 trial, participants showed roughly double the improvement compared to therapy alone. Researchers think MDMA's boost in empathy and fear extinction helps trauma patients revisit memories without being overwhelmed. JAMA Psychiatry in 2020 and New England Journal of Medicine in 2022 trials found comparable or greater antidepressant effects than leading SSRIs after just 1 or 2 sessions. Now, ketamine, Biological Psychiatry in 2022 reviews confirm rapid symptom relief within hours that can last up to a week, making it life-saving in acute depression casing. Microdosing in 2021 placebo-controlled study published in eLife found little to no measurable benefit compared to placebo. So yeah, that coworker who swears microdosing made them a creativity ninja, it might just be the placebo effect flexing. Now, before anyone runs off the forge for therapeutic mushrooms, a few caution flags. All of these studies were done in controlled clinical environments, medical screening, trained therapists, sterile compounds, and follow-up sessions, not at Coachella. Let's get real. Outside those settings, psychedelics can be unpredictable. Dosage varies wildly when you're dealing with street or homegrown sources. You don't always know the purity, and that can turn one's spiritual awakening into another person's panic attack for 8 hours. Psychological risks are significant. Acute anxiety, confusion, paranoia, even psychotic breaks in vulnerable individuals, especially those with a personal or family history of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. There's also something called hallucinogen persisting perception disorder, where users experience flashbacks or visual distortions weeks or months later. It's rare, but it's real. Psychologically, psychedelics aren't a free pass either. They can raise heart rate, blood pressure, which is dangerous for people with cardiovascular issues. Combine them with other substances like alcohol, SSRIs, or MDMA, and you've just created a chemistry experiment your body didn't sign up for. Now, let's talk about the myths. Psychedelics won't automatically make you enlightened, creative, or trauma-free. Some people come back from a trip more anxious, more confused, or just more convinced they can talk to houseplants. So here's where I get a little preachy. Science over rhetoric. Just because something is natural or trending on Reddit doesn't make it safe or effective. We need careful regulation, long-term data, and certified therapist training before these treatments can safely move beyond the lab. Because the goal isn't to romanticize tripping, it's to responsibly unlock therapeutic potential without turning it into a wellness fad. All right, so let's take a step back and breathe for a second. We've gone from MDMA-fueled empathy explosions to mushrooms that can humble your ego into a puddle. What do we actually know so far? First, the science is genuinely promising. We're not talking about fringe studies or late-night Reddit threads. MDMA, psilocybin, and even ketamine have all shown real therapeutic potential, backed by heavyweight journals like Nature Medicine, JAMA Psychiatry, and the New England Journal of Medicine. For conditions like PTSD, depression, and end-of-life anxiety, these substances aren't just interesting. They're changing the game. And second, let's pump the brake on the microdosing craze. Everyone's favorite productivity hack hasn't exactly passed the scientific sniff test yet. Recent placebo-controlled studies, like one in eLife, found that most of the benefits people report from microdosing actually might come from, well, thinking they're microdosing. Placebo effect remains undefeated. Third, the mechanism is what's really fascinating. Under the influence of these substances, the brain seems to loosen its grip. The usual rigid neural patterns that define how we think, feel, and react start to relax. Some studies even suggest that there's an increase in neuroplasticity, which allows the mind to rewire itself, opening new emotional and cognitive pathways. It's like your brain finally updates its software after years of ignoring the remind me later button. And finally, the big one, context is everything. The setting, the guidance, the integration afterwards. Those aren't extras, they're essential. The therapy around the drug often matters as much as the drug itself. Without it, these experiences can just be that, experiences, rather than lasting transformation. So here's the question we're left with. If a single guided psychedelic session can sometimes outperform weeks of traditional talk therapy, how should our mental health system respond? Do we move boldly, opening doors to a new era of treatment? Or do we move cautiously, remembering that every miracle headline deserves a healthy dose of skepticism? Either way, the future of mental health might not come in a bottle of pills, but it certainly might come from a guided journey through the mind itself. That's today's Brain Blossom, short, smart, and slightly trippy in a legal way. If you enjoyed this, follow Planting Thoughts on YouTube and Spotify for longer dives into psychology and the weirdness of being human. Until next time, keep your neurons firing and your skepticism stylish. See you later.